The Ed Bernstein Show. Now, here's Ed.
Robert Wittman is a former FBI agent. He's recovered more than $300 million in stolen art. This is like a TV movie. And a little bit later in the show, we are going to get sexy with Jennifer Romas and talk about her. Well, exes and lots of shows. Robert Wittman is a former FBI agent who specializes in recovering stolen art, jewelry, etc. You know, when you watch this on TV, Mr. Whitman, it's fascinating, but I've always wondered, you know, when you're selling art, eventually, aren't you going to be caught? I mean, isn't the piece going to turn up somewhere, sometime?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Ed, for having me on. It's great to be here with you. And that's the situation. I mean, the true art in an art heist, it isn't the stealing, it's the selling. So what are you going to do with that artwork, especially if it's very valuable and worth a lot of money? It's known. So that's when we recover all of this stolen property. I'd say when you look at very, very valuable artwork that's been stolen, you know, $1 million paintings, that type of thing, 95% gets recovered. And the reason for that is when it goes to market, whether it's through a sale or through an auction or when they sell it to, say, me undercover as an officer, that's when we get it back.
And how does that jive with all the fraudulent artwork that's going around? Yeah, I mean, you hear more about that, right? I mean, just fake art.
Right. Well, you know, here's the situation with that. The art market itself yearly is about a $200 billion business worldwide. I'd say $6 billion, that's the estimate from the FBI. $6 billion of that is the illicit cultural property market. That's the criminal stuff. My opinion is about 80% of that is frauds, forgeries, and fakes. So that's the biggest part of the crime market, fraud, forgeries, and fakes worldwide.
Right. And you also work with jewelry as well as art?
We do. My company, Robert Wittman Incorporated, we've done cases involving stolen Rolexes, stolen jewelry. We had a task force at the FBI in Philadelphia working with the Major Crimes Division, where we actually had individuals leaving Philadelphia and robbing jewelry stores all over the country. They did a couple of robberies in Las Vegas, and they would bring these pieces back and sell them to the jewelers on an area called Jewelers Row in Philadelphia.
Right. And a lot of these major cities have those jewelry areas. New York has it, Philly has it, I mean, D.C. I mean,
they do
have it, right?
They do. It's very difficult to recover stolen diamonds.
Because what's the first thing you do? You steal a diamond ring. What's the first thing a thief's going to do?
Well, I don't want to say because I don't want to give anybody.
Take the stone out. I mean, I know that.
Okay.
Right? And it's easier to sell the stone than it is to sell the piece.
You can pop the diamonds and right. Sell those, and they're usually not going to be GIA certified. So there's not going to be any digital record of them. So yeah, that's probably what happens. And then as far as gold is concerned, it can be melted down. So, but the problem is, though, you steal a $100,000 diamond ring. The actual metals and material that go into that ring are probably worth $10,000. The real problem is that the money that it's worth is because of the completion of the ring, creating the artwork. So when you cut down things for just metals and stones, it's 10% of the value.
So you're saying the cut of the diamond itself has some great value, and once you cut it up, change the character of the diamond, is worth less money.
Or the character of the jewelry.
Of the jewelry.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
You know, people steal these very old types of jewelry, you know, like crowns and things in Europe. And if they destroy them by taking them apart and taking the diamonds and the stones out, they get, a tenth of the value of the piece because it's the history of the crown. It's where it comes from. That really means something.
You mentioned you even worked on crimes and thefts in Las Vegas. You recently were at the Mob Museum here. What is it with the fascination that Las Vegas has with mob?
Well, I think that there's been some really great movies, and the movies have always had a big fascination with mob. And, there was a famous Robert De Niro movie about the beginnings of Las Vegas and the mob and how they were connected with, starting Las Vegas up. I just think it's something that has a lot of interest, and the Mob Museum here is one of the best in the country. It's one of the top 10 visited sites, in the area as far as museums are concerned. And it has a really, really good collection.
Right. And no jewels, no real ones anyway.
I hope not.
So how did you get involved in this?
Well, you know, when I was first in the FBI, I was transferred to Philadelphia. I came in through Baltimore, and I really wasn't interested in this. When I came into the FBI and started in 1988, and during that period until I retired from there in 2008, I was involved in $300 million worth of recoveries. But the thing was, when I first started, there was a great TV show. It was called Miami Vice. And when I was a young man, I used to watch that show and think, that would be fun. It'd be good to go to Miami and sit on one of those cigarette boats and wear a suit. I wanted to be Crockett. But I ended up in Philly, which is not. It's a long way from Miami. So one of the first cases I got involved with was this theft from the Rodin Museum on the Parkway in Philadelphia. And we were able to solve that. It was an armed robbery. We recovered that particular item.
That was a sculpture or a piece of art?
It was a sculpture. It was called The Man with the Broken Nose. And it was one of the first sculptures that Rodin did. That sort of made Rodin into an impressionist. And it was considered one of his finest at the time. So that was stolen at gunpoint. We did the case. We were able to recover that. And as a result of that, the FBI then sent me to the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia, which is a wonderful museum and art school, where I took up art lessons, you know, about the history of art. Did that for a year. And then once I was trained, they put me into art investigations.
Your family was in the antique business, so you must have developed an eye for for detail on a piece of fill in the blank art, jewelry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't know. The FBI didn't know that my family was in the antiques business, and what it really comes down to, when we talk about art crime, it's not about the history of the art; it's about the business of art and how to do a deal. And art deals are almost a little bit like drug deals. It's not just a standard retail situation. There's always ins and outs. So knowing how to do a deal in the art world was what made me good at what I did.
And when you're watching this on movies, you're always hearing about two types of thieves, the professional and the non-professional. The professional seems that they already have a way to dispose of the property and an idea, and non-professionals don't have a clue what they're doing. They bring it to a pawn shop and get busted.
That's the movies.
Right. So how do you start really track these things down?
Well, it's a standard property crime investigation. I mean, that's why it was so important back in 2005 when I started the FBI's National Art Crime Team. So I founded that team.
So before that, the FBI did not have a specialized team for this?
That's correct. Before that, there was no specialized team that had training.
Right.
And, Italy had 300 investigators that do nothing but art theft, art crime. Their OCBC in Paris is a specialized group, 636 investigators. Scotland Yard had their antique squad, but we had nobody. We had me and a guy named Jimmy up in New York, and Bob and Jimmy were the guys. And so I got back after doing a case in Sweden, armed robbery of a Rembrandt we recovered in an undercover operation in Copenhagen. I got back and I said, we need to start a team, and we have to, compare with the rest of the world. So we went to headquarters and we were allowed to do that. And that's why we started the National Art Crime Team.
Yeah, I just never personally understood how this works. I mean, if somebody steals a Rembrandt, right? I mean, you're going to sell it to somebody who's essentially maybe a billionaire that's going to just hang it on a wall somewhere. But, I mean, somebody's going to see it.
Right.
Right? I mean, you don't acquire these things without wanting to show them off at some level, right? And is that how most people get caught?
Well, you're absolutely right. What you're saying there is what we call the Dr. No theory. All right, back in 1962, there was a great James Bond movie called Dr. No. And at one point, there was a Van Gogh, the year before that was stolen. I'm sorry, it wasn't a Van Gogh, it was a Goya that was stolen from one of the British museums. It literally was true. And so a producer had heard about that, and he had a reproduction of that painting made and put it on an easel. So when James Bond went into Dr. No's lair, he looks over and he sees the painting. And he says, I wonder where that went, And that's like the Dr. No theory now. Everyone thinks that there's this billionaire sitting there looking at these paintings in his basement. I've never seen that happen. In all my years of doing these investigations, 30 years, just give you an example, that Rembrandt that we did the undercover operation on was being sold to us for $250,000 in $100 bills.
Okay. And it was worth
$35 million.
$35 million. Okay.
But, the thing that makes a piece of artwork valuable is the history, the provenance, authenticity, and good title. And you as an attorney know that stolen property doesn't have good title.
Never.
So as a result, you have nothing. It's no value. And so 250,000 is a lot for something that has no value. So that's the situation. And most people don't want to lose $250,000.
With today's technology, is it, and I guess it works both ways. It makes it easier to steal, and at the same time, it makes it easier to identify a fake, I would think. I mean, is it easy to, how does that work? I mean, do counterfeits get better and better, but the techniques in identifying them, they, also get improved?
I would say it's actually more difficult to authenticate than it is to identify a fake. You can bring a painting in and say, okay, it's done by Jackson Pollock, but it has to be authenticated. And how is that done? The paint still exists that he used. The canvases aren't that old. It was the 1950s. The stretchers that they're on are still in existence. So it's easy to identify a fake that has problems, but it's hard to identify something that's authentic because there's so many good fakes.
It must be easier or to authenticate an older piece, because then you can gauge the age of the painting of the canvas, that type of thing.
Well, it takes two things. It takes connoisseurship. In other words, you have to have experts look at it and say, yes, that looks like the brush strokes, that looks like the type of material that Da Vinci would have used. And you also have to look at it forensically to see the age of the canvas, the types of paints, all that sort of thing, to make sure it's all non-problematic. But even at that point, there's no guarantee. Because, when we're talking about, let's say a Da Vinci that sold for $400 million, well, somebody's going to pay $400 million. You got to have something beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any doubt. And so it's difficult to do that when a painting is unknown.
How are most of these things acquired today? Are they acquired by force, at gunpoint, or are they by concealment? How are they typically acquired?
You mean stolen pieces?
Yes.
I think today there's not so many gunpoint robberies as there used to be. And we talked earlier about technology. Technology has made it more difficult to steal these objects. There's great surveillance now. There are all types of motion detection. All of that's very helpful. It's all IT.
Right.
But the problem is people go and do steal, and they do it, like you said earlier, either through an armed robbery planned, or a burglary, or just by shoplifting. That happens too.
So when you're starting for the FBI, you're starting, hey, we're going to have a new group of agents that are going to really get into, roll up their sleeves and understand the whole art, theft, and business. Why do they have to be trained? What do you have to teach them?
Well, they have to be made comfortable. It's mostly it's making them comfortable with being involved in these types of cases. Police officers always want to be in charge. They always want to be, people have people listen to them and, be the expert at the scene. When it comes to art, and someone's looking at a Monet, they don't know the difference between a Monet and a Picasso, a typical police officer or FBI agent. So the first thing we would do is bring them in and give them a working knowledge of what a Monet looks like, of what a Renoir looks like, compare them. And if we go to the Barnes Foundation, that's where we brought them for training, that first group, and there's so many Renoirs and Monets in the museum that you see one side by side, you can tell the difference. So within 3 hours, I can teach someone how to recognize the difference between a Renoir, a Miro, a Monet, and a Picasso, or even a Jackson Pollock, just by being there. See, that's 50% of the battle.
Yeah,
it's having them comfortable. Most of the time, police departments don't care the difference between a Monet and a Chevrolet. It's just property. But one's worth more, that's all.
Uh-huh. And your visit here in Vegas, I mean, the mobs, typically dealt with cash. I mean, that was their big thing. Maybe counterfeiting. I mean, that's very similar to what we're talking about in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you still have to unload the counterfeit money, and you got to wash it.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hard part, is getting rid of the merchandise.
Well, yeah, money laundering.
Yeah. But the mob was never into jewelry and art.
Oh, they stole property. The mob was in the property. They were in the art. They would steal art and sell it. I mean, the traditional mafia in Italy was very much into stealing art from churches. There's all types of schemes that they do today as far as stealing art. One of the things they'll do is go to a church and they'll steal a giant painting with 30 characters, angels, demons, saints in that particular artwork. And then what they'll do is they'll cut the faces out and sell each one as an individual artwork. So it's very difficult then to identify the overall painting. That's a scheme that they're doing today. So yeah, they're very much. When I was undercover somewhere in the world for 10 years, or like say the Copenhagen case where we recovered that $35 million Rembrandt. I was undercover as a authenticator for the Russian mob, okay, in Russia. So yeah, there was mobs all over the world.
Right, sure.
You know, and
Still are.
yeah, still are.
Yeah. During the Second World War, a tremendous amount of art was stolen. Has most of that been found or located, or what's the status of that?
It's still way out there. There's a lot of art. About a third of all the art in Europe has changed hands during the war. And the Second World War was the biggest amount. Actually, the biggest was the Italian. It was the Romans.
Right.
But coming forward, the biggest amount was the Second World War, the Nazis. And I'd say 85% of that's still out there and has never been recovered. It's different. It's in different places, but the world's changing. You know, there are a lot of treaties now that have been passed and laws have been passed to recover and repatriate the art. So it's working out pretty well now.
It's fascinating. Look, if you want more information about Robert Wittman, you can visit his website, and you could also, I guess you can click on, and this is his book, Priceless, which we didn't really have time to talk about. Fascinating story. And there's also a link of how you can get your presentation over at the Mob Museum
Right.
that you just recently did.
Yeah.
Also, really interesting stuff.
Ed, thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Appreciate being here. It's fun.
Well, I am excited to talk about a brand new show in town with an old familiar face. I don't really mean old in the true sense. I meant that, just infamous.
Thank you.
But Exxcite.
Exxcite.
Exxite.
And we are excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, and so you have a brand new show called Exxcite over at the Rio.
At the Rio Hotel.
Waking up that old Rio Hotel.
Yes, we
Talk
are.
about
We
old,
are,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. And what is the difference between, because I know like over the years you had the Sexy Show.
Yep.
I mean, you've been, the woman.
What he's trying to say is I've been here for a minute.
No. But
kidding.
not only that, but when it comes to this genre of entertainment,
Yes.
I mean, you are the woman.
Oh, thank you.
You are the
Thank you. Coming from you, that's a huge compliment, so thank you.
So, but the Sexy Show is different than the Exxcite
It
Show,
is very
right?
different.
And what would the significant differences be?
Well, and I think too, this is great because that you brought that up. I don't think a lot of people. I think a lot of people think I just changed the name, and we definitely did not. Sexy was running at the Westgate Las Vegas for about 7 years pre-COVID, and it is coming back, so stay tuned. I'm trying to work out some tours and other venues here in Las Vegas as well. But I had an opportunity to create and bring a new show to the Duomo Theater. I partnered with Damien Costa and Pompeii Entertainment. And the room, the Duomo, is kind of a rock vibe room, so it wasn't the right room for Sexy. So, branding my shows, branding my company with kind of the double X thing, we came up with a name called Exxcite, and it is exciting. It's more of a rock vibe burlesque, and when I say rock, I don't mean 80s rock, although I am an 80s rock fan, but it really does take you on a very diverse journey of different rock music that are all affiliated somehow. And some of the music I don't think people necessarily think of as rock, but they all do have that influence. And the women are incredible. We've upped the ante with costumes, and what we've done within the room is incredible. The ceilings are low, the stage kind of reaches out and embraces everybody. So the women are kind of like coming at you full force, and it looks like a rock concert with our lighting and things like that. And I have an incredible singer. Her name is Gaby Lopez, who's fairly new to town, and we call her our Queen of the Night. That's kind of her title. But again, the dynamics, it's just...
I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
you just kind of alluded to it. So when you're creating a show, do you create the show and then fit it into the room, or do you take the room and create the show around the room?
So usually, I have a concept. I have a concept. And sometimes I don't know where it's going to be or what the elements of the room are, specifically with this one, because the show is actually already created. So I thought it was going to be like an easy kind of drop in to the venue, and it was definitely not. So I get creative sometimes by looking at my surroundings and what I can do with that. We have no wings. We have basically no backstage area. There are no curtains. So I've had to make very, very...
Adjustments.
a lot of adjustments and use the space well. How we transition props on and off. So the whole stage is kind of set up as an immersive experience when you walk into the room. We've got a big, huge throne chair, like a Gothic kind of throne chair. We do have a bathtub, but it's like a black bathtub. We've got a motorcycle on stage. I've got poles on stage. We put aerial rigging in the room. And I don't think when you walk into this room specifically, you think you're going to get what you get. So that's what's kind of exciting. But
it's an exciting surprise.
It is. It's an exciting surprise. And I get creative by looking at the space. It helps me to create.
And I also notice that, like, for instance, when I watch America's Got Talent, and I do watch it, and I looked at the first couple years and look at it today, the athleticism and the talent has really gone up.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and I was curious, like, when you do choreography, I mean, how do you keep current with what can be new or next? Because you got to keep raising the bar.
Absolutely. That's actually a good question. I honestly don't know. I'm not performing in this show, so normally my creative process, being an entertainer, obviously myself and a dancer, and an acrobat and all those things, normally I create by doing. I put music on, I go into the dance studio, and I feel what feels good to me to dance to. And then I put that into choreography, and then I set it on the group. This was a very different experience for me. I do have some injuries that I'm dealing with right now, so my body is not moving how I would like it to move when I create, and it was very frustrating going into a space and trying to build a show where I'm like, okay, I just rolled now and I can't get off the floor, or my arm's not doing that, or I can't do these things. So it was actually a frustrating experience for me, but also a growth experience. I also kind of grew through it. I did bring some assistants in with me who are in the show, and I used their bodies to kind of create on. I mean, I can still move. I can still move, but it became very different. I can't do the same things that I used to. So I think by watching,
it gives you more time to do that. I mean, look, there's positives and negatives in everything.
Absolutely.
I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Hey, I kind of experiment myself and figure out how to move from here to here, to how to bridge that move.
Absolutely.
But when you're just observing somebody else, because there are other talent that may be, I don't know, maybe more double jointed than you and can do things that you can't do that maybe were limited in the past because you weren't looking at it in that direction.
Absolutely, and I think it causes us to take ourselves out of the box a little bit. I'm so used to being inside the box, and I was able to step out of the box and watch. And I'm kind of like, I'm a proud parent with this one because I had a vision and my team are the ones that brought it to life.
So how do you recruit the dancers?
Wow. We had a huge audition. So yeah, we had an audition, I think back in May or June or whatever, and incredible support from the community coming out to audition for the show. And I already had 3 girls going into the audition selected. That I'd worked with before that I knew were going to be in the show, so I didn't have that many spots open. And of course, Vegas being the entertainment capital of the world that it is, there are a lot of dancers that, are looking for work, that are auditioning and going into things. So had an audition. I teach a few different genres that I know are going to be in the show, and they come out and they turn up and they turn out, and then I go through the process, the headshots, their experience, who looks good together, their heights, special skills. It really.
And how do you do the costume? Do you design costumes? Do you hire somebody to do that?
I do. I have someone that works with me, Terry Smith, and she makes everything quick changeable. She does all of our blinging with the rhinestones and everything on our costumes and things like that. But I primarily pick out everything and design them for the show. And
Las Vegas, I would suspect that we still have the greatest selection of dancers anywhere in the country. Here,
Absolutely. Vegas is incredible. The talent here, and sometimes I don't think we get recognized for that because there is LA still, and shows coming in, big productions coming in, like Dita Von Teese is coming in and things like that from out of town. I think sometimes they bring their LA crew in, and I love LA, but then they end up finding out that, oh my God, there's so much incredible talent here and diverse talent here. I mean, all of our acrobats and aerialists, and I mean, it's
So when
amazing.
Assuming, let's say you have 8 girls in the show, so how many do you have to hire to fill the eight? You have to have some,
I have to have, obviously,
right?
yep,
Somebody,
a larger
somebody
family.
Gets hurt, somebody
Absolutely.
Gets
We
sick,
have
they're off a couple
scenarios
days.
and swings and extra
Yeah.
girls that learn the show from the beginning that we rotate in and out and things like that. And so it's definitely not just the 8 performing.
And I asked you about the venue, and I asked you about the choreography. I want to ask you the same question about the music and the idea for the show. Does music come very early on?
It does. It has to. It has to come
Yeah.
first. So that's interesting that you asked, because a lot of the songs that I probably would prefer to dance to, or that I find super exciting or sexy or whatever, aren't necessarily the ones that ended up in the show. I kind of create a list. I listen to music over and over and over again. I do a lot of research, where music came from, who wrote it, the styles, the popularity, things like that. And I have a list like this long of music. And I kind of start going down, crossing things out. What works? What costumes can go with what? How do these transition into one to the next? And then get down to my shortened list.
And you give me just a little sneak peek. Give me like one. When you say it's a lot of rock music, what's one song that you really are, really loving that's in the show?
I think all of them. It really is a diverse selection. We've got things: Thunder, AC/DC, Sail, AWOL Nation. Because I Love You, Lizzo, which people don't think is a rock song, but if you know who wrote it, you definitely would. It was written by rock artists. Cherry Pie. We've got some Alicia Keys and Maxwell in there with electric guitars, Come Together. I mean, the music is very, very diverse.
The shows are at the Rio.
They are.
Right?
Yep.
Saturday, you're off on Sunday.
We are? No, we're not.
Oh, you're not?
Saturday, Sunday, and Monday at 10
Saturday,
p.m.
Sunday. Okay, I'm reading it wrong. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 10 o'clock at night. No children?
No children. It is adult orientated, but it is not a completely topless show. So
Okay, hey, it's
come on
Exxcite
out.
with Jennifer Romas, choreographer, owning the show, running the show, doing magnificent things.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Sexy,
Thank you for having me.
sexy plus.
Sexy plus. Exciting plus.
Yeah. See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.